Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. The soft touch of the leather seats made Sarah feel slightly uneasy, and she carefully adjusted her sitting position in an effort to look more elegant and natural. The lighting in Le Bernardin's dining room was soft and ambiguous, and the refracted light from the crystal chandelier jumped off her wine glass as if mocking her apprehensive mood at the moment. "You're especially beautiful tonight," Nathan, sitting across the table, said in his low, magnetic voice. He reached out and gently stroked the back of Sarah's hand on the dining room table, a gesture that used to make her heart beat faster, but at the moment made her feel a twinge of guilt. Sarah forced a smile and took a sip of the red wine in her hand. It was a 2015 Château Margaux that Nathan had ordered especially for her. She knew the bottle cost enough to buy a luxury bag, but at the moment all she felt was bitterness in her mouth. "Thanks," she whispered, her eyes wandering over the ornate decor of the restaurant. "This place is great." It was indeed great. Everything was perfect, from the elaborate candlelight of the restaurant to the perfect dish Nathan had ordered for her, and even the sound of the cello that was looming over the restaurant at the moment. But Sarah's heart felt like it was being clutched by invisible hands, suffocating her with every breath. Her cell phone vibrated in her handbag. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and she knew who it was from. Her husband Andrew never contacted her at this time of day unless he already knew something. "Need to see it?" Nathan asked gently, noticing her distraction. Sarah shook her head and forced herself into an easy smile. "Nothing important." But her hand shook involuntarily, and she almost spilled the red wine in front of her. The phone vibrated once more. For once, Sarah couldn't keep pretending as if nothing had happened. She pulled her cell phone out of her handbag and two messages from Andrew showed up on the screen. "Enjoying your date? Turn around and look behind you to your left." Sarah felt the blood freeze in her veins. She turned her head mechanically and looked to the back left seat. There, she saw a scene that instantly broke her spirit. Her Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary were sitting there, staring at her with icy eyes. Uncle Frank's eyes were full of disappointment and condemnation, while Aunt Mary looked away as if she had seen something sickening. Sarah felt her world collapse in a flash. Her relationship with Nathan, the secret she'd so carefully maintained for 6 months, all her lies, fell apart in this moment. "Sarah, are you okay?" Nathan's voice came from a distance. "You look pale." She tried to say something, but her throat felt like it was clogged with something. The phone vibrated again in her hand as new messages came in one after another. "It's amazing, isn't it? You think you can hide it from everyone forever? I gave you 6 months to come clean, but you chose to keep lying to me." Sarah felt her eyes darken, and the elegant music of the restaurant sounded like an ironic elegy at the moment. Her fingers traced the tablecloth unconsciously, leaving a few crease marks. All those elaborate excuses, her perfect alibi, all the meticulous arrangements she'd made, all came crashing down like a house of cards at the moment. Nathan seemed to finally notice her abnormality as he put down his knife and fork and asked with concern, "Did something happen? Do you want to go out for some air?" Sarah shook her head, knowing she had to keep her composure, at least for this occasion. But when she glanced again at her aunt and uncle's seats, she realized they were already up and ready to leave. As Uncle Frank passed her, he left a comment so soft it was barely audible. "You've let the whole family down?" The words were like a sharp knife that accurately pierced Sarah's most vulnerable spot. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she knew she couldn't break down here. Not in front of Nathan, not in front of all these people. The phone continued to vibrate, but Sarah no longer had the courage to read the messages. She knew Andrew wouldn't stop there, that this was just the beginning of his carefully planned revenge. The irony of it all was that at the moment she finally understood why Andrew had been so calm over the past few weeks, and why he had suddenly suggested that she take it easy tonight. "I think I need to go to the restroom." Sarah stood up, her voice sounding like it was coming from far away. On her way to the restroom, Sarah felt every eye on her, judging her. She knew that starting tonight, her carefully constructed perfect life was about to fall apart, and she was to blame for all of this. Under the bright lights of the restroom, Sarah looked at herself in the mirror. Her carefully applied makeup was still perfect, but the fear and despair in her eyes couldn't be hidden. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself, but the panic inside her grew stronger. She knew that the night had only just begun, and what awaited her would be an even more painful punishment than the one she was receiving now. It was that evening 6 weeks ago that Andrew first smelled that unfamiliar cologne. It was a normal Thursday. He got home earlier than usual and Sarah was changing. As he stepped into the coat gang room to get his tie, a woodsy-toned aroma, if anything, drilled into his nostrils. The smell wasn't overpowering, but it was distinctive enough, with base notes of sandalwood and patchouli, definitely not any of the perfumes he used. At first, Andrew just frowned. They'd been married for 7 years, and he knew Sarah's habits all too well. She never liked to spray perfume on her body, claiming that it would interfere with her sense of taste and savoring the food. And the scent, obviously, came from some man. "How was your day?" At dinner that night, he asked as if nothing had happened. "As usual." Sarah replied with a slight twinkle in her eyes. "There's a new project in the company, so I'll probably be busy for a while." Andrew nodded and didn't press the issue. He began to notice the subtle changes. Sarah started to work overtime more often, received messages from the work group from time to time, and even went out on weekends for urgent meetings. She became extra conscious of her grooming, purchasing several new clothes and a new perfume. The changes that should have made a marriage better planted seeds of doubt in Andrew's mind. He starts looking for clues in Sarah's belongings. In her laptop history, he found a reservation for an upscale restaurant. On her credit card statement, charges appeared for cafes and bars she had never been to. Most importantly, in the agenda book she kept on the dining room table, the so-called project meeting times did not match up with her actual schedule. But Andrew didn't vocalize it. He spent 2 weeks quietly gathering every detail. He hires a private investigator to document Sarah's whereabouts every time she works overtime. Photos show her dating a tall, handsome man on various occasions. That man is Nathan, an executive in charge of market development at Sarah's company. "I might be back later today." At the moment in Le Bernardin restaurant, this message from Sarah is still lying in Andrew's cell phone. He knew she'd be here, just like he knew Nathan would choose this restaurant. Andrew opened his cell phone and looked at the update from the private investigator. Target confirmed. The other target's wife is in position as planned. He gave a sneer. Nathan, the man who acts so polite around Sarah, has actually been married for 10 years and has 2 lovely daughters. His wife, on the other hand, chose to work with Andrew after learning the truth about her husband's infidelity. Time to close the net. Andrew sent a message to Nathan's wife, Emma. A few minutes later, Nathan's cell phone vibrated. Andrew could imagine how that message from Emma would destroy Nathan's carefully maintained lie. "I know where you are and I know who you're with. Don't even think about explaining. A lawyer will contact you tomorrow." Sure enough, it didn't take long for Nathan to leave the restaurant like a panicked, trapped animal. He couldn't even be bothered to explain it to Sarah, leaving her sitting there alone, confused and panicked. Andrew took it all in, like a well-choreographed play. It's no accident that he has Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary show up at the diner, but it's an important part of this revenge plan. He knows that Sarah cares most about what her family thinks, and that their disappointment will be one of the hardest punishments she'll ever have to endure. As Sarah walks to the restroom, Andrew sends her one last message: "Don't go home. You don't have a home anymore." He knew Sarah would come home. She always did, still holding on to a glimmer of hope in the worst of situations. But what awaited her would be a world of complete strangers. Andrew stood on the street outside the restaurant, looking out over the glittering night scene of New York. He thought about their wedding, the way Sarah had looked in her white dress, the vows she'd made, and the 7 years they'd shared together. "Are you sure you want to do this, sir?" his attorney asked on the other end of the line. "Execute it." Andrew's voice was calm. "It's time to end it." He knew Sarah must still be in the restroom at the moment trying to calm down, as she did whenever she had a weak heart. And Nathan is already on his way home, ready to face his broken marriage. This carefully planned revenge was finally brought to a close on this night. But for Sarah, this is just the beginning of the nightmare. Andrew turned to leave the restaurant. He didn't need to witness the end of the drama, because he knows that an even bigger blow awaits Sarah when she finally returns home. Everything has been organized like a precision clock with every cog working perfectly. Sarah stood in the restroom of Le Bernardin's restaurant, her hands clenched on the marble countertop, trying to calm her rapid breathing. In the mirror, she looked like a delicate puppet, her makeup perfect but her eyes empty. Nathan's sudden departure confused her, and it wasn't until she checked her phone again that she realized the full extent of the truth. "I hope you can forgive me, Sarah." This last message Nathan left was like a dull knife, cutting through her heart bit by bit. "Emma already knows everything. I have to go back and save my marriage." Emma. The unfamiliar name exploded in Sarah's mind. With trembling fingers, she did a quick search of Nathan's social media. Soon enough, she found them, the ones she deliberately ignored. The wedding photo of Nathan and an elegant blonde woman, the family photo of them holding their two adorable little girls, the fun times of last Christmas. All the pictures are so cozy and perfect, it's like they're mocking Sarah's stupidity. She became a ridiculous third party, and she didn't even know she was a third party. With a ding, Andrew's new message came back. "Surprised? Your perfect lover turns out to be a liar." Sarah felt her legs go weak and had to lean against the wall to stay on her feet. Now she understood why Nathan always shied away on weekends and holidays, why their dates could only ever be on weekday evenings, and why he never let her go to his apartment. Everything is an elaborate lie. And Andrew, her husband, obviously knew everything already. He orchestrated the perfect revenge, making her suffer the heaviest blow at the easiest possible moment. The appearance of Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary is no accident, and Nathan's hasty departure must have been arranged by Andrew. "Don't go home." This warning from Andrew seems to hint at something even more horrific about to happen. Sarah took a deep breath and forced herself to leave the restroom. The atmosphere in the restaurant was still elegant, but everything about the moment took her breath away. The waiter politely asked if she needed help. She just shook her head and walked quickly towards the door. The New York night is still bustling, but Sarah feels like she's being held in a vacuum in a glass enclosure. She stood in the doorway of the restaurant, the cold wind blowing her carefully styled hair. Where should she go? Going home? But was it still her home? Sarah's fingers traced over the screen of her cell phone, trying to call Nathan, but his number had turned into an unreachable busy signal. She tried to open their chats, only to find that all the conversation history had been deleted. Nathan had just disappeared cleanly from her life, as if he'd never been there. Sitting in the car, Sarah's hands shook on the steering wheel. Andrew's warning echoed in her head, but she started the car anyway. She needed to go home, even though a final judgment might await her there. The lights of the entire city blurred in her eyes as she drove along. Bits and pieces of the past 6 months flashed through my mind. The sweetness of every date, every stolen kiss, every melodramatic lie. She thinks she's found true love, but in reality, she's just playing a ridiculous supporting role in someone else's marriage. What's even more ironic is that while she's cheating on Andrew, she's also being cheated on by Nathan. The pain of this double betrayal almost suffocated her. All those loves she thought were etched in stone proved tonight to be nothing more than an elaborate hoax. The parking lot below the apartment building was dark. Sarah sat in her car, staring at her cell phone screen. There was no apology from Nathan, no understanding from Andrew, and even Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary chose to remain silent. For the first time, she felt truly alone. "Maybe I shouldn't have come back," Sarah muttered. But she knew that running away wouldn't solve anything. She must face the consequences of her choices. The mirror in the elevator reflected her pale face. At one time, she thought she was a smart woman, able to balance marriage and extramarital affairs perfectly. But reality taught her the cruelest lesson of all. The moment you choose to cheat, be prepared to be cheated. Standing in front of the apartment door, Sarah's hand stopped on the doorknob. She knew that what awaited her after pushing the door open would be a deeper despair than she was experiencing now. But she had no choice. It was a web of destiny that she had woven with her own hands, and now it was time for her to get caught up in it. The darkness behind the door seemed to be waiting for her, as if fate had already prepared her for her final punishment. Sarah took a deep breath and her trembling fingers turned the key, pushing open the door to the unknown. When Sarah pushed open the door to her apartment, darkness did not envelop her as she expected. Instead, every light was on, illuminating the space where she'd lived for 7 years to the nth degree. But the sight in front of her caused her heart to instantly fall into an icy hole. The living room was empty. The wall that had held their wedding photos was now bare, leaving only a few nail marks. A stack of papers lay neatly on the coffee table, stark in the bright light. All of Andrew's books on the shelves had disappeared, leaving jagged gaps as if the spine had been roughly jerked away. Sarah's legs went weak, and she held onto the door frame to keep from falling. When she finally mustered the courage to walk into the living room, more details came into view. The vase on the dining room table that was her favorite was gone. The photo of the two of them on the TV stand disappeared without a trace, and even the red wine they had collected together had been emptied, leaving only the dust in the glass wine cooler to dance gently in the light. The papers on the coffee table were divided into stacks, each one sorted and organized with different colored labels. At the top was a divorce decree, and Andrew's signature had landed firmly on the paper in achingly smooth handwriting. "No, this can't be," Sarah muttered, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the papers. The second stack is a notice of termination of the lease of the house. Andrew has made a deal with the landlord that as of next month, this will no longer be their home. The third stack is a split document for various accounts that clearly delineates their joint property. The last stack was a detailed list of every item that belonged to Sarah. She dropped onto the couch, only then noticing the suitcases neatly arranged in the corner of the living room. It was all her luggage, carefully packed and waiting to be taken away. Every detail reveals Andrew's meticulousness and determination, like a precise scalpel to divide their lives completely. Sarah shakily took out her cell phone and dialed Nathan's number. Still a busy signal. She sent him countless messages, but they all went stone cold. The man who once said he loved her was too busy saving his marriage at the moment to care about her breakdown. She tried to contact Andrew again, but his number had blacked her out. She couldn't even find him on social media, as if he had completely disappeared from her world overnight. Walking into the bedroom, Sarah found the closet door wide open. The half that belonged to Andrew was empty. Even the hangers had been taken. Her clothes, on the other hand, were neatly folded on the bed, as if silently urging her to leave. Her skincare products were still in place in the bathroom, but Andrew's razor, aftershave, and all those daily necessities that the two of them shared had disappeared. Every corner of this home was a reminder of what utter devastation her betrayal had brought. Sarah mechanically walked into the den and turned on her computer. But the screen only displayed an icy line. Wrong password. She tried several times, but couldn't log in. Apparently, Andrew had changed all the passwords, cutting off her last link to the outside world. Back in the living room, Sarah noticed an envelope still sitting on the dining room table. Inside was a check and a note. "Here's your breakup fee, enough to rent a new apartment and start a new life." Every word on the note was written neatly and forcefully, without a trace of emotion. At that moment, her cell phone suddenly rang. Sarah almost lunged for her phone, but the caller ID chilled her heart. It was Emma, Nathan's wife. She didn't answer. She didn't know how to deal with the woman she had hurt. The calls soon stopped and were replaced by a text message. "I originally thought you knew Nathan was married. Now I realize we're both victims. But that doesn't change any of the facts." Sarah curled up on the couch, tears finally breaking out. She picked up the divorce papers on the coffee table and read them word for word. The terms of the agreement were surprisingly lenient, and it seemed that Andrew didn't want to make things difficult for her in terms of property. But it was this rationality and equanimity that cut her to the core the most. She tries to call Nathan's company, but learns that he has taken an extended vacation. She reaches out to their mutual friends, only to find that everyone knows all about it and has chosen to remain silent. Andrew had clearly cut off every avenue of retreat around her. It was late at night, and the apartment was awfully quiet. Sarah turned on the TV and tried to fill the awful silence with a cacophony of sound, but every channel seemed to be playing about marriage, betrayal. She turned off the TV, only to find the silence even more unbearable. When she checks her phone again, she finds that even Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary have blacked her out. Loved ones who once loved her have chosen to cut her off at this moment. For the first time, she truly understood what isolation was. Sarah walks to the window and looks out over New York at night. Behind those lighted windows, there is no telling how many people are experiencing similar pain. But at the moment, she felt like the loneliest person in the world. Because she not only lost her husband, she lost her lover. She lost the trust and respect of everyone. She caused all of this herself. Sarah sat in her empty living room at 3 in the morning, the glow of her cell phone screen stark in the darkness. She had messaged everyone who could possibly help her, but all she got was either a cold response or perpetual silence. The last hope falls on Uncle Henry. Uncle Henry was her father's best friend and had always treated her as if she were his own after her parents died. Even in her most rebellious adolescence, Uncle Henry was always on her side. Now, he was the only relative she could still dial. Sarah took a deep breath, and her trembling fingers pressed the call button. The phone rang for a long time, so long that she had almost given up hope when a tired voice came through. "Sarah?" The simple call made her unable to control her tears any longer. "Uncle Henry." I know what happened." Uncle Henry's voice sounded unusually heavy. "Andrew already told me." Sarah bit her lip to keep from crying out. Still, the tears flowed uncontrollably, dripping onto her clenched cell phone. "Uncle, I really don't know what to do." Her voice choked. "Everyone's ignoring me, even Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary." A long sigh came from the other end of the line. "You've let us all down, Sarah. Especially Andrew. He's a good man." I know I was wrong." Sarah buried her head deep between her knees. "But what am I supposed to do now? I don't even have a place to live anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, so long that Sarah thought even this last straw was about to break. Finally, Uncle Henry spoke up. "You can stay in my vacation home for a while." The unexpected offer made Sarah gasp. "Is that really okay?" "But on one condition." Uncle Henry's voice became serious. "You are leaving New York for Connecticut. I don't want you to stay here and cause problems for Andrew and his new life." Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. Leaving New York means giving up her current job and everything she knows. But she had no choice. "When can we move in?" she asked softly. "I'll have the housekeeper clean it tomorrow, and you can go over the day after. I'll text you the address." Uncle Henry paused. "Sarah, you have to understand that this is going to take a long time." "What takes a long time?" "Rebuild trust. Not just Andrew's trust, but the trust of the entire family. Your behavior has hurt everyone who loves you." The words were like a sharp knife, piercing Sarah's most vulnerable spot with precision. She knew her uncle was right, but the truth was still painful. "I know." She tried to keep her voice steady. "Thank you, Uncle." "Sarah." Uncle Henry's voice suddenly gentled. "Remember, no matter what happens, you will always be my niece. But you need to take responsibility for your choices. The process will be painful, but it's something you have to go through." After hanging up, Sarah went to the window. The sky in the east was already beginning to whiten, signaling the coming of a new day. But for her, this dawn brings not hope, but fear of the future. She opened her cell phone album and looked through the pictures with Andrew. 7 years of marriage, countless moments, all destroyed by her own hand. Andrew was always pictured with a gentle smile, the kind of smile she would never see again. Sarah thinks of their wedding, of their first home, of all the good times. Those memories were now sharp thorns that dug deep into her heart. She couldn't even blame Andrew for his heartlessness, because she was to blame for it all. It was getting light. Sarah began to pack her bags and put her life into those boxes Andrew had prepared for her. Each item held a memory, and each memory made her heart ache. When she tidied up to her nightstand, she found a photo pressed into the bottom of a drawer. It was her engagement picture with Andrew, the two of them standing in the fallen leaves of Central Park, smiling so happily. On the back of the photo is written in Andrew's handwriting, "To my favorite Sarah, may our love always be as gorgeous as the maple leaves in the fall." Sarah gently placed the photo in the box, the only evidence she had left that the marriage had ever existed. Early morning sunlight began to pour into the room, coloring the empty walls a golden color. Sarah stood at the window, looking down at the gradually bustling street. People start a new day, but for her, the world of yesterday is gone forever. She knew that in the days to come, she would face all the questions and accusations, and bear all the consequences alone. It was the price she paid for her betrayal and the process she had to go through to rebuild her life. Sarah took one last look around the once warm home. The empty room looked unusually harsh in the sunlight, but she knew it was no longer her safe haven. On this silent morning, Sarah finally realizes that some damage, once done, can never be repaired. The only thing she can do is try to rebuild a life of her own out of these ruins. Even if the process, as Uncle Henry said, would take a long, long time. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.